friends, and he would call them up, and things would happen. Nothing corrupt, nothing bad. Just, you know, we need
How were
to.
you able to tell that they didn't have any expectation? I'm not saying that you're wrong about that, but I'm wondering how you were able to detect that.
Because I met them later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, uh, I don't want look. A lot of these people were either former or active security-related individuals, but they're just great people, and they weren't there in a security capacity. They were there as human beings trying to help out a fellow human being in a mission they all believed in. This mission of improving relations between Russia and the United States. They all believed in this mission. But he had friends that were also doctors. He had friends who were lawyers. He had, in this business world, he is setting people up. He's making people successful. They're doing a business deal in Novosibirsk, and suddenly they're making a lot of money, and they can buy cars and they can do all this stuff, and they're all there. So when he, wanted to show us the fireworks for on May 9th, he knew the person to call. That person ended up hosting us in their apartment for a wonderful dinner, and then you walk upstairs to the roof and you get to watch the fireworks.
Oh, that's nice. It's
because
very similar to a certain country we're familiar with.
So
yeah.
he no, but Alexander is just he's a good person.
All right. Well, I hope he comes. I'd love to meet him. Now, we should get to the question, Scott, from the audience, but I want to ask you one more question myself before that. You mentioned that by framing this as a book tour, that would make things kosher with the U.S. government. You wouldn't have any problems. But when you got back to the airport at JFK, if you could tell us about what you experienced there, because I know they gave you a rough time. And one thing that I'm not that sure about, maybe you could clarify it for me, is what is their role? Because you wrote about this in an article that they really got into debating with you about certain things, about what was going on in Russia and so forth. They accused you of mouthing Putin's propaganda and so forth. Yet you said, oh, they were very polite and professional. So what are they supposed to do? What's ostensibly the purpose of when they question you coming through customs?
Well, I mean, they're allowed to ask questions, first of all. I mean, legally, and they can play hardball. They can seize your phones. They can seize your computers. And if you want to piss and moan and say you can't do that, about a year later, you might get your computer back, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. They can take your phone, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So, and I know this. I mean, I've been around the block. I know how this game works. So, my thing is, do I go in and play Mr. I'm a journalist, First Amendment, stick it in your ass, I ain't going to cooperate with you, name, rank, serial number, fuck off? Or do I say, how do we do this so that, you think you're getting what you need, and it minimizes the detrimental impact on me? I had a suitcase full of gifts, all declared, but if they had wanted to, they could have seized the gifts. They could have released them to me after making me pay thousands of dollars in tariffs. I mean, I did everything right. I had all the documentation, everything ready to go. So what I did instead of fighting them, I just said, let's have a conversation. And so we sat down and we had a conversation, and he had questions. And it wasn't, horribly aggressive, but, I'd say something, he goes, well, there are people who say that what you're doing is spouting Russian propaganda. And I'd say, well, I'm sort of fact-based, and I'd go through the facts. And then, well, we interview thousands of Russians who have fled Putin's dictatorship, and they have told us a completely different story. These are all the Navalny followers that fled and came back. And so we just had this long conversation, but it was very professional, very courteous, no yelling, no screaming, just asking questions, and, little side comments here or there. But, in the end, they didn't seize anything. He went through.
Did they know who you were? I mean, were they reacting to you as somebody who they knew about and was preparing to treat you in a particular way, or were they more like, "Oh, here's a suitcase full of gifts," and just responding to what was in front of them?
Both. They knew who I was. Just right there in front of them. They knew exactly who I was.
Did they say Scotty's on fire, or use any of our favorite catchphrases?
He didn't say Scotty's on fire.
Was the word odious used at all?
I used odious a couple times, just so that it would get into the transcript and enter into the U.S. intelligence community's database. Now the word odious is there; it's searchable. But no, and at the end, he used what he said. It's officer's discretion. He said, "Go." He didn't do anything. So, you know,
were you and Vika interviewed separately or together?
Yeah, no, separately. Yeah.
And they treated her okay as far as what you were told?
They did. She had less of a sense of perspective and humor than I had. She was pretty pissed off that they were doing this, but she held her tongue. But it was, you know, again, it is what it is. You know, I may have gotten a little bit longer questioning, but it wasn't. I was concerned that it was going to be worse than it was, and it wasn't.
Scotty's on fire. All right. Well, now you're back. You can say anything you want. I'm not going to be confiscating your gifts, and we can just let it rip, U.S. style. Thomas Muller from Munich, Germany. Our first question of the night: how was your journey to Chechnya? Did it differ from the rest of Russia, considering its Muslim majority?
Well, it's Chechnya. When you say the rest of Russia, you know, prior to going to Chechnya, I was in the city of Kazan, which is the capital of Tatarstan, and Tatarstan is a Muslim majority republic within with the Russian Federation that enjoys significant autonomy. Beautiful city, Muslims and Christians peacefully coexisting. You know, sort of a perfect blend of Russian society. He says Dagestan would have been nice. We were in Dagestan. We drove through Dagestan, and when we entered Dagestan, people have to understand there's still a Islamic extremist element in some of these areas, and Dagestan's one of them. And you'll read about a couple times a year where there's a shootout in the village where the Russian police surround a terrorist group and there's a fight and all this kind of stuff. So entering Dagestan, you have to go through a checkpoint, and boy, these people were just like, what the hell are Americans doing at the border of Dagestan? And Alexander's trying to make his phone call. These guys are like, that ain't going to work here. What the hell are Americans doing at the border of Dagestan? And Vika and I got taken out of the car and we got paraded across the road into an office. And I told Vika, I said, well, now I think we know what Tsar Nicholas II and his family felt like right before they got shot, because this were just guys with machine guns walking all around, and we're just like, okay, it wasn't that bad. They just simply had questions.
I don't know who they're dealing with.